Okay, so let's take a look at moderation and mediation for Module 2. So to start out, I think it'd be good to just revisit the bivariate model. So our bivariate equation is going to be y equals cx plus b naught plus epsilon. Cx is going to be c is going to be the slope or the interaction between or the relationship between x and y. B naught is going to be our y-intercept, and then epsilon is going to be our residual. So looking at moderation, Barron and Kenny described and defined a moderator as a variable that is going to affect the direction and the strength or the strength of the relationship between an independent predictor or predictors and the dependent variable. So in this case, our independent predictor is going to be x and our dependent variable is going to be y. So a moderator impacts the direct effect and the outcome, and the moderator is always going to just be causal. So as we can see here, the moderator does not have any effect on the predictor, but it does have an effect on the relationship between the predictor and the outcome, and it affects the outcome as well. So let's take a look at a couple of these moderation models. To start out, we're going to look at this first one, and I used x1, a moderator, and the interaction between the two to predict y. So in this first model, we can see in the code below that x1 is going to be a significant predictor of y. The moderator is not going to be a significant predictor of y. And the interaction between the predictor and the moderator is going to be a significant predictor of y. So we can expect to see a very, very similar line based on what we have going on within the code. So the two lines, there is a red line and a blue line in that graph up and to the right. They are essentially the same line. They are laying right on top of each other, which is what we would expect to see based on the data that's shown here. So looking at the diagnostics, we can see that we don't have evenly distributed residuals, and then we do also have pretty good normality within the model. Not a lot of deviation on the tail ends. And then our Cook's distance also looks okay. Although we've got a little bit of whiskers coming up in the bottom right hand corner. So let's take a look at the second moderation model. This is going to be the opposite from the first model. So we can see that x1 is not going to be a significant predictor at the 0.05 level. The moderator is going to be a significant predictor at the 0.05 level, and then the interaction between x1 and the moderator is also going to be significant at the 0.05 level. So again, we can take a look at the graph above, and based on the data that we have below, we can expect to see that as well. But let's take a look at the diagnostics for this one. So again, we've got a large cluster of the residuals just right around 0, 0. They're unevenly distributed. And then looking at the norm QQ plot, we do have some deviations at the tail ends as well. And then our Cook's distance doesn't look too bad. And honestly, the norm QQ plot doesn't look too bad either. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the third moderation model. And for this model, we can see that x1, the moderator, and the interaction between x1 and the moderator are all going to be insignificant at the 0.05 level. So again, the graph is going to depict that too, because you've got two different lines that are going to be parallel to each other. They start at two different locations, and there's no interaction for them either. So looking at the diagnostic plots for this one, we have a little bit more of evenly distributed residuals. Our Cook's distance looks pretty good, and then again the norm QQ plot doesn't look too bad. A little bit of deviation at the top end, but nothing to be concerned about. So with all that being said, it's time to move on to mediation. Just a quick side note, I do know that the C prime button, or the C prime symbol, is actually supposed to be right next to the C. I don't know why it keeps doing this whenever I go into slideshow, but just thought I'd make a note. So Barron and Kenny described the difference between a moderator and a mediator in that a moderator is going to specify when an effect is going to take place, whereas the mediator is going to explain how the effect occurs. And within these examples that we're going to look at today, Preacher and Hayes would define it as a simple mediation. In an article written in 2008, they described two different types of mediation: simple mediation, which has just a single mediator, and multiple mediation, which has multiple mediating variables. So, and then in our direct effects, previously we were looking at the x to y as c. So the reason it's going to be c prime here is because it's actually going to be an indirect effect, because that c is going to be a partial c. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment as well. And so moving on to the first model, there are basically two different paths in this model. So again, we've got the C prime, and then we've got the A to the mediator to the, and then the B path going from the mediator to the outcome. So David Kenny described on his website that was last updated in September of 2018 the two different types of mediation. So there's complete and partial mediation. Complete mediation is when the predictor X, in this case, has no effect on Y without the mediator first, and that makes the that makes the path from X to Y 0. So in that case, I'm going to say that one more time. So in complete mediation, X does not affect Y without the mediator. So looking at partial mediation, the direct path from X to Y is actually going to be reduced by the mediator, but X to Y is still going to be greater than 0. So in that case, you're going to have some of X moving towards Y, whereas the other is going to be moving up towards the mediator and then down towards Y. So taking a look at this first mediation model, we can see that the average causal mediated effect is going to be insignificant at the 0.05 level, and then the average direct effect is going to be significant at the 0.05 level. So in that case, what we can see is that X is going to be is predicting Y without the mediator. So let's move on to the second one, and then in this model, we can see that there is actually no effect. Or there is no significant effect for Y at all. So in this case, both the average causal mediated effect, so we're going to call that the AB path, or the A path, is insignificant, and then the B and the C prime path are also going to be insignificant. So overall, this model does not have any significance at all for predicting Y. So that's going to be the end of the module. Talked about moderation and mediation. Thank you very much.